When life gets unpredictable, preparation matters. In medicine, it's all about staying alert, ready for whatever comes through the door. On the road, it's no different. That's why Volvo designs vehicles to help anticipate risk, reduce harm, and protect lives. The Volvo XC90's advanced safety systems inspire confident decisions wherever the road takes you. The Volvo XC90, for life. Proud sponsor of the Pit Podcast. Learn more at volvocars.ca/safety.
And thanks for tuning in to the Elias Macko Show this morning. As it just happens, coincidentally, as we do this third hour of the program, we're in a U.S. Department of Justice frame of mind because we've got another story here that deals with how U.S. law enforcement is going after a corporation. Now, we talked about TD Bank, a Canadian bank, as we started off this hour. But this time around, we're going to talk about Google because this summer, Google lost a huge antitrust challenge, right? U.S. judge deeming Google guilty of illegally monopolizing the search market. And you know this. When you're going to search for something, you probably say, oh, I'll Google that. You don't go to Bing. You don't go to DuckDuckGo. Although I will get the text message from the one listener that does go to DuckDuckGo. But you know that search and Google are pretty much synonymous. But now Google might get broken up. The U.S. Justice Department considering asking a judge to force the company to sell off parts of its business. It would be the biggest forced breakup since AT&T, Ma Bell, was broken up in the U.S. in 1984. Let's go to Mitch Joel. On this program, if we want to talk about tech, we go to Mitch Joel. He's an advisor, investor, and author of CTRL ALT Delete. He's the founder of ThinkersOne. Mitch, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Elias. Happy Thanksgiving. Thanks for having me.
Happy Thanksgiving. And I always feel when we talk on the phone that we should actually be on Apple Vision Pro headsets in the future, but I digress. Okay, so Mitch, they've lost the antitrust challenge. Now comes, well, what do we do? What does the government do about it? What do they do about it? What do you think should be done about Google's quote-unquote illegal monopoly of search?
What does the government do? I do not know where to begin and how, if I was on that side of the case, to dismantle such a complex company, the relationships they have, and the impact it has across a myriad of industries. So my first reaction is too late, too long, and there's just too much of this technology that is core to everybody's everyday use. Now, I can totally agree and see the positive move for more competition and consumer choice. We want fair competition in the world, but we also rely upon these governments to do this, I think, in a more systematic way and in a way where we can actually curb this and build some level of competition. So I would be very curious to see how they do this. We can just extract one component of it. How does Google make their money from search? And the question primarily is two ways. One would be the advertising that we see, and second would be on the B2B level, which is allowing companies like Apple or whomever to essentially license or have brokering deals where their search is core to their applications. Can you imagine what's going to happen to the advertising world, which is a large part of our GDP, and how we actually, as small businesses, operate if this happens? So they create competition. Who is taking this up? How good is the product? I'm not saying it shouldn't. I don't want to sound like a Google apologist, but I am very concerned with what happens when you start to untangle these wires that are so embedded and connected.
So, but we have examples from the past, right? Microsoft, right? Operating systems, the U.S. acted there. And I'm just trying to think, boy, it does seem like they've got such a stranglehold. Whether, you're doing just traditional search. Let's say you're on YouTube, another one of their products, and you do a search there. It seems like they've got a stranglehold position. So I wonder about previous examples, and if the hammer came down on Microsoft when it comes to operating systems, maybe the hammer should come down on Google when it comes to search.
So we could look at Microsoft and say, well, we have Apple and we had some other products. And the main thing from my memory of that case was the fact that you are in somewhat of a closed ecosystem. And that was the problem with Microsoft. And now we see a world where if you look at mobile devices by comparison, you have Apple as a closed marketplace. And ironically, or strangely enough, Google seems to be the open marketplace there. And again, I just look at the layers of this. So you're right. From an operating system perspective, there might be an easier way to not enforce things like you have to use our email management tool or our search tool being Bing or whatever that might be. In this case, though, I'm trying to understand what competitive looks like in search, primarily because I'm a marketing guy, in relation to where would a competitor come up and have the volume and traction so that a small business, a medium-sized business would want to advertise there. And this becomes the bigger problem, where it's not simply about creating these walls between search and other options. I get that. But it's the implications of the actual businesses who are trying to grow market share in what is a dominated marketplace. I think, 90+% of search is Google. Makes sense.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We're with Mitch Joel, tech advisor and investor. So if we look at search, and let's look at mobile phones, right? Because everyone now does so much on their smartphone. So you're on your smartphone, you have an Android phone. Well, Google makes the operating system. Of course, your searches are primarily happening on Google. And then they've gone and they've basically taken a truck full of money, stopped it in front of Apple headquarters, and they've given Apple so much money. This is one of the things that came out in this court case, to make sure that the default search engine on the iPhone is also Google. So that, to me, like, if you're a competitor, you have no chance. Like, it would be impossible for a competitor to have any chance of winning the search war just based on that.
Yeah, I totally agree that when you think about creating remedies under consideration, because that's what they're trying to do here, which include restricting Google's exclusive agreements, I think that's an easier place to start, like the Apple one as example, than going through trying to break up search. So I totally agree with that. And that might help them in terms of getting Google outside of having what they would call search dominance or something that looks like monopoly. I don't know what would that percentage be from 90 to, imagine trying to get it to under 50%, what that might look like. I don't know how that does. I think the other case that is very strong here is watching the DOJ target Google's bundling of services. So that's where it gets interesting, which is things like, well, you have Chrome as your browser, you have Gmail, you have Maps. All of this is predicated on your united profile. And then obviously search has an underlying component to it. So I like that, but then I would say to you, Elias, as a user, we're going to have to remove our journalism and integrity hats here and say, do you want this? Do you want to have a potential disruption of your user experience where when you want your docs, it's a separate login and Gmail is now different and not connected to my calendar and all of this having to do with, I look at this and go, yeah, it's kind of crazy what we're feeding into the Google machine. And I've always said that. I said that for 20 years. But now we're beyond that pale. And I don't know if consumers are going to have the appetite to suddenly have all these other disconnected tools simply because the government sees that as monopoly. And I'll push this one thought further. What happens if by breaking them up, we create 15 monopolies? That's my bigger concern.
Yeah, and here's the other thing. What if the real case is, forget regulators and judges, what about the free market? And some people would say, well, look at how Google is doing in artificial intelligence, AI. Oh, they're not doing that great. And there's other products like ChatGPT and Perplexity that are doing better than Google's attempts at it right now. So the best thing to do would be get out of the way, let a competition happen, and then whatever's next, maybe Google won the game on search, but perhaps for whatever's beyond search, like AI, they'll lose that round. Maybe that's the best way. What do you think to that on that?
I think it's problematic because of who owns access to compute, who owns access to the cloud, who owns access to money that could enable them to acquire a bunch of startups and push them forward. And let's not forget that the DOJ is really looking into how Google's search monopoly could potentially entrench its dominance in AI. Like, this is a true thing. You think about AI-driven tools like Gemini and how suddenly that's embedded into your email, seeing Microsoft do that with Copilot and others. So to just say that with having the entrenchment that Google already has, I think that's more problematic, but I don't disagree with it personally because I am a capitalist and I like free markets. And having worked at a company that was in search before Google existed, watching how they maneuvered back then was a sight to behold. The fact that they're dominating, I think some would argue, is based off of monopolistic strategies and and accounts and contracts that nobody can access. But on the other side, the product is so damn good.
Mitch, I love that you pronounced you are a capitalist on this program. I'll take it. Thanks for joining us.
Have a great day. Happy Thanksgiving.
You too, Mitch. That's Mitch Joel, founder of ThinkersOne.